pro-democracy protest in Yemen on August 19. They had huge protests all over the country that weekend and have had massive pro-democracy protests for months. Hundreds of thousands, possibly millions of people have peacefully taken to the streets in Yemen in support of democracy. My name is Scott, and I'm an anti-war activist near San Francisco, and I just wanted to issue a very strong appeal to the Pacifica Network, its radio news programs, and its public affairs programs, such as Democracy Now!, Flashpoints, Mideast in Focus, Radio Intifada, and Arab Voices. Please cover the massive pro-democracy protests in Yemen. The mainstream media has blacked them out. The mainstream media has blacked them out in the West and possibly all over the world. And it's a scandal because this pro-democracy movement is huge, it's massive, and it is so important. It ranks right up there with Syria, Egypt, and Libya. And it is right smack in the middle of the Gulf. The massive pro-democracy revolution in Yemen can spread democracy throughout Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, the Gulf Cooperation Council, and which also affects countries like Jordan as well. This is so vital to the Arab Spring and to the huge mobilization for freedom and democracy throughout the whole region. So the world should know about the great qualities of the Yemeni people. I'm currently uploading as many mass protest videos as I can at youtube.com/SaveYemen1. And there are also many great Yemeni activists on Twitter that are providing updates regarding their huge protests, such as Noon Arabia and Women from Yemen. And I just wanted to emphasize that the mainstream media, by covering up and hiding these massive protests from the world, are not only badly distorting our view of the Yemeni people, but it is also badly distorting and extremely misguided U.S. war on terrorism, extremely misguided U.S. support for brutal dictatorships against the will of their people, and badly distorting our perception of the region and of the pro-democracy protests. It is an absolute scandal. The coverage of Yemen in the mainstream news is an absolute scandal. And what I want to first emphasize is that these huge protests are showing important features about the Yemeni people. The Yemeni people have shown that they are vibrant, they are idealistic, they are yearning for freedom and democracy. They are willing to face horrible armed repression and killings by an armed U.S. dictatorship. They are willing to face that with massive peaceful mobilizations. They have shown that this is a sophisticated, civilized people with a great yearning for many of the freedoms and rights that we, the U.S., is supposed to be standing for. The Yemeni people, they have also shown that they massively support practical solutions for their political problems. These massive protests are in support of democratic transitional councils so that to replace a horrible armed regime and free elections. And they have come out in support of this. And the world should see this. The world should see the courage, the idealism, and the vibrancy of the Yemeni people. And the world should appreciate it and admire it. This is an amazing people. And by covering this up, the mainstream media has tried to make it look like Yemen is just a place with occasional chaos, occasional violence that requires U.S. bombing, U.S. armed intervention, that requires a U.S. dictatorship, and that requires Saudi intervention. And it's actually the very opposite of this. You've got the will of the people with a pragmatic, great vision for freedom and democracy, and you have a U.S. armed regime there, a U.S. armed dictatorship that has killed hundreds of protesters, shelled the villages, gone to war with the tribes in the north and the south, and which is destabilizing the country in an attempt to greedily hold on to power. And the U.S. has refused to condemn this regime's atrocities, even though it has killed hundreds of people, created so many refugees, and is creating a humanitarian crisis, which is leading many people into hunger. So another thing that has been covered up is that the Saudi Arabia is also their Gulf, the GCC initiative. What that does is that would still leave the regime's party in power. It would still, even though it might replace the man, the actual dictator Salih, it would still impose a horrible, ruthless, tyrannical regime against the Yemeni people, against their will. And all of this has been covered up. Another thing that has been covered up is that the Yemeni people and the Yemeni pro-democracy movements and the Yemeni tribes are all staunchly opposed to Al-Qaeda. They have come out saying it over and over and over again, and the Yemeni tribes are actually fighting against Al-Qaeda. All of this has been totally suppressed and ignored. So the United States is ignoring a major pro-democracy movement that is sharing many of the values we are supposed to be sharing, and that is staunchly opposed to the groups that we say that, to the terrorist groups that we say that we're opposed to, and while doing that, we're narrowly supporting a ruthless dictator and bombing the place, further destabilizing the country and making the situation worse. The Yemeni people and their tribes and the pro-democracy movements are staunchly opposed to Al-Qaeda because the Yemeni people, they value their country, they want to have their basic freedoms, basic rights, and they want to live in peace like anyone else. And they don't like it when foreign terrorists come into their country to do violence and damage. And all of this has been ignored. So the U.S. policies, its support for dictators, its misguided war on terrorism, it's all been covered in a very, very distorted way in the media. And it's a scandal. It really is. So please do show the world about the great courage of the Yemeni people. Show the world about this important revolution, and let the world see the millions of people who have come into the streets. And I want to close off with a very important warning for the Pacifica Network and for U.S. anti-war activists in general. As you know, the mainstream media in the United States it badly distorts coverage of the Middle East because of the United States support for Israel and Israel's horrible ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. What we also have going on is Saudi Arabia is also filtering out the news coming out of the Middle East. Saudi Arabia has a huge influence on the Gulf Cooperation Council and had persuaded it to invade Bahrain in an attempt to violently crush its pro-democracy movement. And Saudi Arabia and the Gulf Cooperation Council have a huge impact on the news coming out of Qatar and the surrounding countries such as the United Arab Emirates. So you will see Al Jazeera English showing many videos about countries that Saudi Arabia opposes, such as Syria, but being practically silent about the huge pro-democracy movement in Yemen, and the few times it does cover it, will cover it in a distorted way. Saudi Arabia is hostile to democracy in the Gulf. Its invasion of Bahrain proves that, and you do need to be aware that Al Jazeera English and the news sources coming out of the neighboring countries there are providing news in a way that covers up Yemen and that is very tainted towards Saudi Arabia and its hostility to democracy. So I'm now going to switch over to a very inspirational speech from an activist in Yemen who is further showing how courageous and idealistic the Yemeni people are, and further coverage of their protests. Thank you so much.
Dear Mr. Ambassador, the Ambassador of the United States of America, we are here today in a silent protest to tell you that we are the youth of Yemen, very civilized. We are not terrorists. We are very organized. We have our own goals and our own plans. Our demands are justice and peace. We want to live like any other just nation in this world. We would have come to you. We would have come to the American embassy to talk to you. But we know that if we went out 1 meter away out of this square, snipers are going to shoot us and kill us. How many of us should die for the world to pay attention to us? What is the appropriate number for the United States of America to be on our side? Hundreds of people have gone so far. Do we all have to die for the United States of America to believe that our demands are just? We do have plans. We want the dismissal of the president. We want the dismissal of all the corrupt leaders. We want to form our own transitional council of 5 members that are known for their integrity and experience. 4 of them are civilians and 1 of them to take care of the military section. The country is not going to be divided. Yemen will stay one. We will protect the unity and the peace. We want Yemen to be civilized. Today, our protest is both genders, males and females, to assure that we live in a civilized society that believes in gender equality, that believes in the freedom of speech, that believes in the injustice. We believe in the American nation as a just nation who will stand on our side. We believe that the European nations will be on our side because they are people like us. They lived with us. They came to Yemen as tourists. They came to Yemen as students. We welcomed them and we proved that we are one of the most civilized nations in the world. Finally, I have to say this in Arabic. الشعب يريد إسقاط النظام. الشعب يريد إسقاط النظام. الشعب يريد إسقاط النظام. الشعب يريد إسقاط النظام. Allah